Hi everyone, Carm O'Sullivan here, Heart to Heart Medium. Today I have Jenny Chavez here, and she is a friend and has taken some of my intuitive training classes. Amazing soul, financial advisor, is that correct?
Correct.
And she's had an interesting life too, and challenged. And she's here to tell her story. And with that, I'm really glad you're here today, Jenny.
Thank you.
And so I'm going to let you you lost your husband 15 years ago, is that correct?
Yes, correct.
So I'm going to let you tell your story on that. And you're an inspiration, first off, and that's why you're here.
Thank you.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
And I'll interrupt you when I can.
Okay. Story. Well, yes, I was married. Actually, we were married over 16 years. So
Wow.
I guess you'd call us high school sweethearts. 2 sons. And when my husband died, it was by suicide, carbon monoxide. And I actually was the one that found him. And so since then, I've been raising our 2 boys who are now 23 and 19, but at the time were 8 and 3, almost 4.
Wow.
So
That must have been, first off, you had to manage your own grief, and then you had your boys to take care of,
correct.
and their grief, and to manage them.
Right.
That must have been quite a load, I would say. So tell me about that time. How did you handle that as a widow, and also handling him leaving the way he did? Wow.
Obviously, besides just handling a death, it's the type of death that made it a lot harder. On top of that, unfortunately, his family blamed me initially. And I think with suicide, a lot of times people just don't understand. And they blame the person closest to them, thinking they must have known the answer as to why it happened.
Well, and they're also not wanting to blame their son. They
Correct.
want to find the closest, somebody
Correct.
else besides him.
Right.
Yeah.
So honestly, I'm not going to lie, very difficult. I think I've told you before, my analogy, the way that I kind of look at it is I felt as though I was tossed in the air and just waiting to land. I didn't know.
I think that's a perfect analogy, because when I see that, when you said that to me, I saw it visually in my head, and it made me feel how you felt, how scary that was.
Because it is. You go about your life and you think you kind of know what to expect, what's happening, and something like that is just so jarring. You kind of don't know what to do with yourself. You don't know what to do with your kids. It impacts your job. It impacts family and friendships. Really, a lot of things.
There's so much thrown at you. The paperwork,
Right.
the newness of being alone,
Right.
the dealing with the emotional side of it with you and your children. When I read The Widows now, I think about that, and I also tell them what you told me. I use that, and they go,
Right.
"That's exactly how I felt."
Well, and it's hard. You can't compare deaths based on whether or not it's spouses versus children versus parents. Death is death, and it affects people obviously based on those relationships that they had individually. But when it is a spouse, that's your other half. That's the person that helped pay bills. That's the person you were building your future with. That's the person that helped care for your children.
Yeah.
I remember after he died, my older son didn't feel comfortable going back home because he knew it was very apparent. There was no longer 4 of us. Now there's 3 of us.
Wow.
So we stayed with my parents actually for about 8-9 months. Like, I'm talking the day of forward. We just stayed with them, and my house just kind of sat there.
Wow.
And I do remember a night, you've got your support, you've got your family, and they were amazing. But I remember kind of sitting in my parents' living room and watching TV, and my parents went up to go to bed together. And I just kind of remember the feeling of sitting there going, I don't have that anymore. It's just me to kind of figure it out.
A picture. I can see that.
Yeah.
Realization.
Right.
Kind of a slap in the face.
Big slap in the face.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And there's theories, there's rich widows, and there's all these, things that were said. I had said people say a lot of
Weird,
ignorant things
Yeah.
after someone dies, and they don't even realize what they say sometimes. And they assume that certain things fix it. They don't understand what you're going through, and they don't understand you now have new problems, right? That
How would you tell somebody now, knowing what you know now from what you experienced in the past, how would you counsel somebody else who their friend lost their husband the same way? How would you counsel them to walk in a path that would be graceful for that friend?
Well, honestly, 3 weeks after my husband died, I joined Heartbeat. It's a survivors after suicide group, and it's here locally. And so now, it's kind of funny. You somewhere along the line become the expert. Mm-hmm. People determine you're now the expert because you've got more experience than they do.
Then they're
but
done.
I lead the spousal group in that.
Did that help heal you?
That helped a lot. And so you realize that even after you're going and you don't think you need it so much anymore, something that somebody else says ends up still helping you. Or something you say, you have no idea, you're just kind of talking, and people come up to you later and it's nice that they actually recognize something that maybe you said that helped them. So that's been a big thing, diving into that, obviously. So to answer your question, I used to tease, I would start, of course, my kids in therapy, me in individual therapy, family therapy, everything you can kind of do. And I used to tease with a best friend of mine. Therapy was on Tuesdays. And as soon as I was done with therapy, I'd give her a call and say, I'm cured. And of course, we would laugh very sarcastically because we know you're never cured from this. It's something you're learning to live with and learning to change your life. And so for what helped me that I try to help other people with is it's almost like a little bit of everything. I tell my kids, we're building our arsenal. So if it's going to personal therapy, if it's going to groups, if it's blogging on a computer or reading books, if it's going out, which I highly encourage, once a week with a friend just for a drink or dinner. Me joining the gym was really a big
You could take your stress out. Well,
you could, even without even realizing it's stress, because you don't. You put your focus, I put my focus into helping my children heal.
Yeah.
And I thought I was helping myself, but a lot of times you realize your focus is so intent on them being okay that you don't always give yourself
You're in the
time.
back burner.
Right.
Yeah, and you're also focused on probably bringing the money in and making sure the household is correct.
Right, absolutely.
I feel like also, for instance, is forgiveness side of that. Here he does something that to me is, I would feel would be, if it was my husband, would be like, wow, how do I forgive that?
Oddly, people used to ask one of my sisters, about me. They would say, is your sister really angry at him? Because, it is a typical feeling or response for a lot of people in general, but widowers. I never felt anger towards him. If anything, I tried to relate to, for someone to get to this point, what would he had children. So me aside, he had children. And for me, that was everything. So for someone to get to a point in their life to still do that, and I don't mean this in an encouraging way, but it was almost sacrificial. It was almost as though he was thinking...
Felt it was better off.
Absolutely. So I don't think it was intended to be negative towards us. I truly believe, he was only looking at his own pain, and that's all that was kind of being reflected
He saw
back.
it as, it would be better without me here, my poor kids. Compassion. I mean, you gave him the compassion.
And that's how I felt. I've never felt... The only time that I would say anything even remotely near an anger or frustration is really me being a woman, and afterwards I'm having to learn man jobs, right? I'm having to get up on a roof, or I'm having to fix something broken.
Change the batteries.
Get out the drill, stuff that you just take for granted that he just did those things, I did these things. And so... And I don't want to say this on camera exactly. His name was Fred, and those would be my effing Fred moments, is really what I would say. That would be the only time that I would just kind of call out his name and be like, effing Fred, And again, I turned it more comical, but that was kind of my moment of frustration where I'm like...
Those were the moments you really
shouldn't be that hard.
Those were those moments of camaraderie between the two of you.
Right. Because I think it's the daily stuff that you take for granted. Of course, yes, it was hard losing his income and me having to supplement that. It was hard losing companionship.
It's the small moments.
But yeah.
Did you have to take the elephant out of the room a lot for people? Because death is a hard thing for people to talk about, because that's what I find in a lot of the, I like to take the elephant out of the room.
Absolutely.
Anytime I have an uncomfortable situation with somebody. And death is probably the most uncomfortable.
Death is very uncomfortable for people. Like I said, a lot of ignorant things were said. But besides that, I think, and people, including family members, have told me before, well, I was afraid to bring him up because I was going to make you sad or make you cry. Well, if you think I wasn't already sad from my husband dying, I mean, I'm fully aware of it. If anyone's aware of it, I'm aware of it.
Yeah.
So I would rather talk like
about
normal, bring it up, share with my children, because my children had a total different experience from other people, but also from each other. And my older son was 8 at the time, very close with his dad. They both were, but the 8-year-old was, I think, more aware. And so he got very quiet. He got very internalized. My youngest wanted to talk and tell everybody all about dad. My oldest, like, don't even talk about it. I don't want to hear it, would get angry. So there was years and years and years. I mean, I have spent thousands of dollars out of pocket on medical insurance, on medical help for various things that have come up for each of them throughout the years. So, that's another aspect people don't realize. So that's why I think family support in general, talking about it, being open. I have been open with my kids from day one, virtually,
I think,
as to age appropriate, explaining to them what happened, but then kind of re-explaining it as they got older and having questions. And now, they're finally in such a good place that they're open to hearing stories about dad. They want to know things, whereas before it was, I think, too painful.
I think what you're saying is true. I think a lot of people shy away, and it's kind of sad because when someone passes away, what happens is they all go to the funeral, they all do the habitual things you do, and then they all go home, they all leave. And by the way, we have a puppy who can't stop barking, so I apologize on my podcast, but he is in training. So the long story short is I find that you have to keep talking about them and not be afraid. So I come to visit a week to 2 weeks after when someone has lost a loved one. I go to visit family, or not even family, friends who have lost children to suicide. And that's when it's quiet, and that's when it's hard, I think.
No, that happens a lot. You've got all the family, all the friends, all the coworkers, even, and a lot of promises, broken promises. We had a lot of people and family friends that, we're going to step in as the dad figure. We're going to take your kids camping. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. And it just never happened.
Wow.
And like you said, January, we just hit 15 years. Never happened.
Wow.
So with those things, that's something that I really had to learn to focus on and teach my kids, is after a while, because I was realizing it myself and then had to change it, your focus goes to the people that aren't there a lot of times. Your focus goes to, like I said, I was being blamed.
Yeah.
Your energy gets drained.
Yeah.
Well, you hardly have energy after someone dies, and so you have to reserve it, and you have to reserve it for what's important, which was myself and my children. So I had to teach my kids, and myself, you have to learn to basically let go of people that are just energy draining and reshift your focus to who's there supporting you.
I love what you just said, because I really feel it's important to recognize who serves you well and who doesn't,
Right.
and drawing boundaries. And I think that's in every life, no matter if you lose a husband or wife or child, because we have just this one life. And we have to honor the people who really do help us. I've done that. I think as we get older, we find each decade of our life, we have less and less friends, but better friends.
Right. And the boundaries is true. Like I said, I had to draw them for myself. I had to help my children draw them as they were getting older. People that weren't around as often, family members, would continue to say things that were upsetting to my kids, and my kids didn't realize for a while they had the power to say something back or not be there.
Yeah.
And I think that was a turning point for them as well, when they kind of realized, oh, I want to see these family members, but if I only am comfortable staying for 30 minutes and then it gets into stuff that's just upsetting to me, I can leave.
I love that, because I think kids aren't sometimes given the opportunity to make boundaries.
Right.
Parents go, you have to go see Aunt Millie.
And I
Aunt
absolutely
Millie's
would
drinking
not.
after 30 minutes. We got to leave, you know? I think it's really important to teach kids they can create their own boundaries.
Well, especially when it's with people that aren't really in their daily lives anymore.
Right.
And that's by their choosing, right? Had my children got to choose, yeah, they would have kept everyone in their lives all the time, every day, very consistent. But when people are going through grief and trying to learn how, they call it the new normal and trying to
Right.
figure their life out, and then it's almost an interruption to that when you have people sporadically come in and out of your life and they're almost going backwards. They're taking you backwards.
Wow.
Because they haven't been with you every step. They don't know where you're at now.
They come in to grieve again, and
Right.
you've already done that. Been there.
Right. And that was upsetting for my kids. It was hard.
Wow. I could see that.
Yeah.
Through this process, you had to grow yourself. So it's been 15 years. How did your heart grow through this?
Oh, tremendously. Tremendously. Part of it shut off. I'm not going to lie. Hard for me still in relationships to allow them almost. And I've done a lot of self-reflection and things even through your classes that have really helped me find me.
Wow.
And a big part of it I realized is I'm afraid. I'm afraid to love someone again that deeply and then lose them, because it was the worst thing
Wow.
in my entire life.
I'm getting such gooses here.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just feel like for you, when I look at you, I know your strength. I see your strength. I also know that you had, I feel like you had to step up to the plate and be financially, you had to figure out who you were too. Did you have to go, what were you doing when your husband passed, and were you working? Were you a stay-at-home mom? What were you doing?
So actually, I that's something when you talk about count your blessings, right, and be grateful, I was very grateful for. I've always had a job. I've always been educated. That's just been something I've always been driven that way. So for nearly 20 years, I was a certified paralegal.
Wow.
So I was already, and I was also the one in our household that paid the bills, that kind of knew about where everything was.
So you were managing the fort financially.
So thank goodness, or I would have been completely lost. There's been a lot of spouses that I have met, my age, younger and older, both male and female, that didn't have that. And so when their spouse died, they didn't know what to do. They didn't even know what their bills were. They didn't know how to get a job. They didn't know how to get income. They didn't know how to take care of their children. A lot of them moved out of state in order to just live with family members to be able to afford things. So I was very grateful for that aspect, because when I told you, you're thrown up in the air and waiting to land, that was at least one aspect. Now, granted, I had to completely readjust it, but that was at least an aspect that I felt I had a little control over, because I at least knew how to manage
That's a blessing.
some of those things.
That's the biggest thing I have found too, is a lot of people, a lot of women, because I'm probably 20-something year older than you. I always worked. And I always took care of my own finances. We've always had this weird agreement between me and my man. But like, for instance, like passwords, getting into people's computers, finding out bank accounts. These are the things I tell people today, women, like, as you get older, you need to know each other's
Absolutely.
finances, your bank accounts, your even I'm trying to think of all the things that you have to do and know, but so you don't have to struggle, because the struggle is already enough for the emotional side, not to be in the financial side. If you were when you're counseling people today who have lost loved ones to suicide, what are the three most important things you tell them?
First and foremost, I like to know, and I question them, if they live alone, if they have, what kind of support they have. And that includes animals. So I highly encourage, have a dog, have a cat, because it gives you a reason, it gives you a purpose, even the slightest thing to get out of bed. You kind of have to get up and let them out to go to the bathroom. Or maybe it'll lead to you walking them, and therefore kind of getting your own exercise, your own outdoor. do you have a job? Do you not? Because I've encountered a lot of people that maybe they're just home alone and they're already retired and they have nothing. That's when I encourage an animal, or very least getting out, I used to say, just make little dates, little appointments. I used to make a dinner date with a friend of mine and her kids every Wednesday night, and I stuck to it. It was close enough that you didn't put it off and change plans, but it was something, that you could kind of look forward to.
Right.
It gave my children a chance to kind of bond and hang out and have their hangout time.
Time.
Gave me my adult time to kind of relate to her. But it was something consistent that it kind of made me have to get out and keep doing something. Now, like I said, I already had a job.
Right.
I did have to return to work because I did have bills that had to be paid. When he died, I was actually finishing my bachelor's degree. I was in my very last semester. Wow. Actually about to start at the following day. My very last semester. Because I took a while. I'm one of those 10 years, to get my bachelor's degree.
That's okay.
But I had gone back. I had gone back, and I was about to finish. And so, yes, I did. Against advice of counselors, when he passed away, I dropped out of school. And so, after I kind of felt like I got a little bit of grounding back, I did return. I finished my bachelor's degree. Since then, I'm now, the past 7 years, in the financial industry. So I got fully licensed and registered in investment advising. This past year, I then got supervisory.
Wow. You're traveling
resignation,
too.
Qualifications. So now I supervise 3 of our branches, and I've just kind of kept doing for me. So you asked, how did my heart grow? I learned to kind of focus on me as well as my children and what helps us, be better people, be what we could have been. Because my one question I never will know the answer to is, who would my children have been if he had still been here, right? So for an example, when they were young, they were 100% sports, and they were good. Wrestling, and I had people come up to me with my oldest and go, this is his thing, you need to keep him in this. When my husband passed, they actually switched. They're now musicians, and they're really good. And so I don't know if that was a different way that they just kind of put their creativity and their emotions and their feelings and their grief, or if that's who they always kind of would have been.
I love that they went to music, because music is such a calming force.
Right.
And what do they play?
A little bit of everything. But I have one, the oldest is a guitarist, and the youngest is my drummer. But they cross over, so they know bass, they know keyboard, just, self-taught, really.
Wow.
But
I just think that's amazing. I believe our journeys are different roads come up. Yeah. How old is your oldest now again? You
23.
Said? 23. And how does he see his life right now? Do you ever talk about what's he looking forward?
I do. He, they both. Right now, he's working in the restaurant industry, which he knows is not really his thing. He's doing it to pay his rent.
But he doesn't.
But he's looking.
You.
So
does he live with you?
No, he actually has his own apartment.
Love that.
And then my 19-year-old, because he just graduated last year, he still lives with me, but not.
I have to say, congratulations, you got one out. That's unusual for
2 graduated. I'm like, okay, I'm done. That's all. I did it. So no, he's kind of. Even where my 19-year-old is right now, they're trying to figure out what their path is, what they want to do. They know their passions, but how can I kind of make this into something?
We were just talking about how hard 19-year-old the age is.
Well, and they both being boys, I noticed major things going on with them mental health-wise when they went through puberty, but then just personal emotional questions when they were about to graduate high school. Now, every senior in high school has questions. What do I do with myself? Shouldn't I be further along? But these were very specific to the fact they didn't have a dad. And so how do I be a man? What kind of man am I? I was raised by a mom. Well, and I have said from day one, I appreciate when friends say, Happy Father's Day, because you're both. I always shut them down and say, but I'm not. I will never be a father. I'm not going to pretend to be a father. I don't know. I used to try to wrestle around with my kids. It's not the same. It's not the same relationship, and I'm not going to pretend that it is.
Energy is not feminine energy.
I understand what they mean, because I'm paying all the bills for both sides, but that's not the same as being a father in their life. And so being that I haven't really dated long term, yes, they've had male figures, my stepfather, my brothers, but nobody that's living in the house that could kind of teach them what kind of man to be. And that's kind of what they struggled with when they were about 18, 19. It's just trying to figure themselves out because they didn't kind of have that.
I could not even, to me, it's hard because, I mean, I think kids have huge identity problems anyway at that age. And without that dad, it's tough. At least you recognize it.
Right.
Did you keep them in counseling at that time, or how did you conquer that?
Yeah, so basically, they had been in counseling for years, and then kind of we would switch. So it's not one counselor. You know, when they start that small, you're starting out with play therapy type counselors.
Yeah.
Then when they get a little older, you move them to an actual talking counselor. Then with that, even some counselors can only take it so far, and they're ready, that they kind of have to be with someone else. So I just kind of advanced it wherever they were at the time with what type of counseling they needed. But yes, as teenagers and even young adults, my oldest still does go to counseling. My youngest has stopped. He just kind of goes sporadically, but it's more now just a maintenance, I guess I'll call it, because there's other things. It's not like they go there and all they're doing is talking about their father dying.
Right.
That's not it at all. It's actually what happens because of that. So there's other aspects of your life that were impacted that for a long time, even my oldest wasn't relating back to the death. He wasn't understanding that's what was going on.
It could be something so small that you don't understand that
Right.
life is so weird, isn't it? You look at it and there's these little nuances that you don't even understand how affected.
Right.
If you had to look back now, how you were 30 when it happened, is that correct?
Something like that.
Something like that.
31, yeah.
Did you see yourself, like, at the age when it happened, would you have seen yourself where you're at today?
No, well, not in the moment, no.
But I mean, like,
No,
did you
yes
have the
and
thought
no.
process of the thought that you might, here you are, you're, in a great job,
Kind of. And I think because I just know the kind of person I am that, and this is what I teach my children, I don't know why it is, but I won't stop. Like, I always think there's a way. So, for example, my kids at times, like I said, youngest, different mental health issues that they'd gone through, suicide attempts of their own, hospitalizations, like, it was bad.
Yeah,
And
I can understand that.
And for me, I had to self-create different types of medical plans for them because unfortunately, insurance stands in the way of a lot of it. A lot of times when you add in drug abuse, people don't relate that to mental health and where that stemmed from.
Right.
So it's hard to get the help you need. So I was having to kind of piecemeal. He's going to have this kind of therapy plus this kind of therapy.
So you really had to be integral.
I absolutely did.
Did you have to fight with the medical community to also?
I did. And I wasn't afraid to get on the phone, though, and tell them what he needed and what I'm looking for. And unfortunately, a lot of what I was looking to create exists, but it exists for adults, oddly, and
Not for children?
not teenagers. Not, I'm all about preventative care, right? Let's fix them now before they
But this could
get
happen
there.
later. Yeah.
And so, I don't stop. I always think there's got to be a way.
I have to ask you, what is your sign? Because you're such
I'm a Scorpio.
You are a force to be reckoned with. I really like your foresightedness, your drive. Were you always this way? Or did this incident create you?
I think the incident brought me out, maybe. Yes and no. Like, I've always I know I've always had it in me. It's a matter of kind of recognizing it, allowing it, I guess, for lack of a better word.
Maybe Mama Bear had
it. Really pushed me to, Mama Bear, absolutely. Like, in all of these instances, my first thought is my kids. So I'm going to keep working because my kids. I'm not going to accept Social Security, let's say in the very beginning when they try to say you can get Social Security because your husband passed, but only if you stop working. You're making too much.
I did not know that.
I was literally told that. I made too much money, so if I wanted it, I could quit or make less money. Well, that's not something I wanted to teach my children, is to be on the system. so I didn't accept it. So
Okay. I had no idea.
It's just a matter of I want to teach my kids, you work for things. You know, I have a sign in one of the bathrooms in my house that says, life is all about how you handle plan B.
Yeah.
And I really believe in that. You will figure out a way.
Because
So
life
something's
is never,
going to
plan
keep
A
hitting.
is never, you know, it's funny, I always like, you're never going to get plan A.
Right.
You always have to have plan B and C in my
Well,
mind.
and a lady I know that lost her husband before, you know, we literally said, you just got to learn to roll with the punches because they're coming.
Feet
and so
downstream.
you just have to
Feet
figure out
downstream.
how to do it.
I always tell my clients, especially because they're fighting control. They want to control. And what happens with the energy of that is you get tired, you get worn out. You're swimming upstream. And when you take a rafting course, they tell you if you get thrown out of the boat, you need to put your feet downstream and just point it, and you will end up on the shore sooner or later, but you got to trust in the water. So feet downstream, point your feet, and trust.
Well, and that's something that your classes and Michelle's classes have helped me with. Control is like my middle name.
Yeah.
It's probably
I was
just
gonna
Scorpio
say,
in general.
Scorpio.
Which I've really, really worked on.
Yeah.
I've become self-aware of what it can do when
Yeah.
you don't have control. But I think the reason I was so wanting control is because I felt out of control. And I thought that this was the worst thing possible that could ever happen to my children. And I could not let them have anything else ever in life happen again that was this bad. Now, granted, realistically, I know I don't have that kind of control,
you
but
don't.
I sure as heck tried. So
Well,
I figured whatever I could do,
You're going to
you
do
know,
it.
I was going to do it.
Well, I feel like what you've done by helping others really helps you. And I want to say this as a medium and a psychic. When we do go up, we get to see how we affected people, good and bad. And we get to feel it, the emotions of it. And I think you're going to have a lot of people applauding you and saying thank you. Because I think you've affected people in many great ways, especially because what you had to go through, you had to learn to teach. And, you know, I don't know. I do believe we kind of sign up for what we go through, but yet at the same point, that sucks.
Yeah,
You know,
definitely.
it does. It sucks. But what you do with what happened, what the lemons that were thrown to you, you really did create a better life for a lot of other people too. Because suicide is such a hard word, and I deal a lot of readings. I deal in suicide, and I know your husband. I know he's very proud of you. I can feel that completely with him. And I do know when they go to the other side, they see the bigger picture in which they hadn't.
Right.
And I know he also is working to help the boys and you. And I bet you feel him too. And I just want you to pat yourself on the back. Make sure, and I want you to be more vulnerable and more trusting because you deserve somebody in your life.
Thank you.
You deserve love.
I'd
Love
like to
yourself
think
well
so.
and love others too.
I think I'm pretty cool. But,
I think
know.
you are. I'm like really impressed. I mean, you know, damn girl. So what I want to say is, first off, you mentioned the organization. Let's say that again. Because
So that's Heartbeat, and it's survivors after suicide. And the reason they say survivors after suicide is it's for us, right? After
Right.
we've lost someone. Now, we have had people actually attend group that have attempted suicide themselves.
Okay.
And they've come into the group, and actually it's pretty enlightening because they can tell you where they were in that moment.
I think that's
in
important.
their mental status to make people understand. It's really not about the rest of us. It was about them and their pain. And
And they're not,
You know.
really, I think suicide is a moment in time. It's a mental state that's not, it's a disease of the body,
Right.
dis-ease.
right,
And if they were thinking clearly, you wouldn't be doing that.
absolutely.
And so with that, you can't get mad at somebody who has cancer. And, a lot of people who had a dear friend's son commit suicide. It was my first time I've ever experienced it myself. And they're Catholic. I'm Catholic. I was raised Catholic. And the biggest fear was they're going to go to hell. They don't go to hell. There is no hell, first off.
Right.
And that's a sad state of affairs if you think that. So they
I
get
agree.
tortured. And that young man is thriving today up there. And what I want to say too is that if you know anybody who you fear that has that mindset, is there a number to call?
There is, unfortunately, surprisingly, I don't have it memorized. But
Suicide prevention. You just
there's a suicide prevention here locally. This is a local support group. We've created other heartbeat support groups specifically on base for military, because we realized that was a big thing. So definitely, I mean, we encourage everybody to reach out, but I think part of it is just, that's why I talked about it so openly with my children. And it didn't stop them from getting those feelings later,
Okay.
but yet they're still here. So I'd like to think that
It probably did.
it did something, right?
Well-
Because what it did, I mean, and they did. Since then, they've been very open to me. So they do come to me now and they tell me how they're feeling, and we work through it. We talk about it. So there's been a lot of things behind closed doors, honestly, that my children and I have gone through. That thank goodness they are still here.
I think every single person, I can't believe, has a moment in time they think about it.
Right.
You know, and some people just take it to the next step.
Right.
So, on that note, I want to tell you how brave you are,
Thank you.
how amazing, and I really appreciate you sharing this today, because I really think it's an important topic, and a lot of people can't talk about it.
Right.
And families all over this state, country, are experiencing it, especially in the military. It breaks my heart, and I know more people than not who have had been touched by suicide. So with
And
that,
unfortunately, until you say something, it's almost like it opens the door for them to then say something. But it's highly prevalent, and I'm happy to see that there's finally talk about it. There's finally commercials about it. There's finally, groups that are there that weren't there before.
it is something that I will say this. God, I'll start crying. The our friend's son who committed suicide. We watched that family get their news. And to this day, my heart still hurts for them, because I know how it felt, even though I wasn't my kid. And I loved that boy. He was a beautiful soul. It hurt. And it's an important subject. And that family I can still feel the pain of the family. And with that, it's important. And I really appreciate you talking.
Thank you.
And, it affects everyone. Friends, family, and it is actually, the energy carries through until it can be broken.
Agreed.
Yeah.
And there's been a lot of research I've done on the topic, a lot of reading I've done. I mean, besides support group, I have dove in probably too deep in order to really understand it.
Well, I don't blame you, because
And-
it's like, why?
There's
how
a lot
can
of
we stop
statistics around it.
How
Right.
can we stop it?
Right.
And it's okay, so here's my bandwagon. Mental health is so important, and we don't discuss it. We want to the topic of COVID for 2 years. I understand it's a topic we need to discuss. Mental health is even more important.
I agree.
And that should be on the top of our list right now.
100% agree.
Yeah. Maybe we'll have a whole nother discussion on that one.
We can do that.
On that note, everybody's affected by mental health. And on that note, I want to say thank you so much.
All right,
I appreciate your soul. Okay. Hasta la vista, babies.
Thank you.
Yay.